We're back again, folks, with DETV's COVID Conversations. I have I guess it's the pleasure of being with a good friend of mine who has graced us on the agenda, our normal show on Thursday nights, Mr. Ron Smothers, who has been with the New York Times now for 35 years and was lucky enough to retire. I don't know if he retired or they asked him to leave. Whatever, he no longer works there, and he's gracing us here today to continue the conversation in regards to COVID, not only in our state, but in our country and everything that's going on. Over the past week, it started earlier this week, we've had excellent guests from Christiana Care. We've had guests from St. Francis, and not just guests, we're talking about the heads of the critical care units that are dealing with COVID every single day. And it isn't the vaccinated people that are in critical care. Let's just be honest. Let's get all the misinformation out there. They made it very clear. 90% of the people currently in critical care, and just here at Christiana Care and at St. Francis, they have the same numbers, are the unvaccinated. Out of those 90%, a great deal of them won't come home. They will pass. On top of that, the percentage underneath of that, a lot of them will suffer long-term effects. What isn't really publicized. Long-term effects that could be anything from your neurology all the way down to your respiratory system. It's beyond words. Well, what can we do to prevent that? We can begin to make sure that everyone's vaccinated. We can work very hard to ensure that people are getting tested, so you're not going into a situation such as tonight. Let's be honest, this New Year's Eve, a lot of people are ready to party and have a good time, which is great. DETV is not going to turn down a party, but this isn't the time to do it. This is a time to use caution. This is a time to use common sense. And it's a time that's like no other in this country. When we look at the Spanish flu back in the 20s, we did not have the technology that we have now. We did not have the amount of research that we could facilitate now, and communication wasn't there to get across to everyone. Granted, there was radio, but when it comes to social media, when it comes to everyone having a personal phone in their pocket where they can pick up, call whomever, tweet whomever, and get the message across, we just didn't have that. And what we thought would be, I guess, an ally in regards to this, in regards to communication, would be our phones, has turned out to be our nemesis. And it's not working with us, it's actually working against us, and it's creating a tremendous amount of misinformation. And misinformation that, in my opinion, is causing death. And death not only in this state, not only in this country, but all over the world. I would also like to reiterate, tonight is probably a good idea to stay home. Keep your circles extremely small. And when you're in these circles, make sure that you're masked. And make sure that you're taking the appropriate precautions, or else there will be a consequence. Don't think, well, I'm leaving Delaware, Kerwin. I'm going to my friend's house in Philadelphia, or I'm going to my friend's house in Baltimore or Washington, D.C. Well, let me make it very clear to you. Those states are on fire with COVID. You won't seek relief there. You will probably get a lot more of the same. And their treatment facilities may be at capacity. So think about that. The other thing is, it isn't about what goes on tonight. It's about what goes on a month from now. What do I mean? COVID takes a while to gestate inside of your body. As Dr. Hicks made it very clear, January, the end of January, is going to be very hard on our medical system. This is when we get the results of what went on over Christmas. That's when people really start to get sick. Point in case, the rise that we're seeing now is from what happened during Thanksgiving, which is about 3 or 4 weeks ago. The perfect storm with that was we got Omicron about the same time, which is highly spread. It can spread very easily. So those two things created a perfect storm. And what are we not doing? We're not using common sense. And that's kind of why I brought Mr. Smothers here today. I want to make sure that it just isn't me that you've been looking at and listening to over the past week. And we've had some great conversations from doctors who I would, if I'm ever in a situation that I require critical care, I hope it's one of those doctors that are helping me and my family. But sometimes that isn't the case. You need somebody on your level, someone who may be able to make it plain for you. So Ron, thank you and welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Kerwin. You set a great, challenging task for me.
Well, it is one that I think that you will be able to succumb. Okay? So sitting back here, we have plenty of political conversations in which we will get into, hopefully at a later date. But today it's about, you know, what's going on in our country, and that's COVID and this Omicron variant. And now seeing this, I mean, what are your thoughts of people that still are not vaccinated, or that are getting held up and wrapped up in whatever their reasoning for not doing so?
Befuddled. That's the word. I am befuddled that I come from a generation that loved and respected and believed in science. And to see people question it so now, I find it amazing. I listen to the doctors. I listen to the researchers. I know, and when I listen to them, that they don't have all the answers. But how could you expect them to have the answers? This thing is new. This is something we're seeing for the first time. Mm-hmm. They're going up the learning curve, but they're going faster than you and I.
Right.
And so I'm going to listen to them. I'm just disgusted, mm-hmm. as you are, at how much misinformation is out there, mm-hmm. how susceptible people are to the misinformation. Mm-hmm. It's a simple thing. Listen to the doctors. Mm-hmm.
So we were talking off air about the...
Oh, and I mean, not Dr. Oz. Listen to the doctors.
Well, that's a U.S. Senate candidate, Ron, for the great state of Pennsylvania. So we have to give him his due respect. The polio vaccine. Now, people tend to forget about that, and they might not even know it. And you want to know why they forget about that?
Why?
It's because we don't have polio anymore, because people are taking the vaccine whether or not you want to take it. Mm-hmm. But when that vaccine rolled out into the United States back in the late 40s, 50s, the government had a completely different task of what they have now. They had to figure out how to control getting the vaccine out because people were rushing to get the vaccine. Yeah. It wasn't, it was easier in this country in the first month. People were, oh, I can't wait to get the vaccine or whatever, and then it kind of faded away. And a lot of those people that said, oh, I want the vaccine, they didn't really want it. They were just saying it to be politically correct, right? But at that time, they decided, correct me if I'm wrong, to shut down schools for a period of time, and you had a day of the week in which you could go that matched your last name. And then you would get lined up, and you would get your vaccine at that time. And I think they, from what I read, was they put it on a sugar cube, they put it on your tongue, and that's how you took the vaccine. Or there was a shot, there was inoculation. There was something to that effect, but it was, the herd was not herd immunity. The herd was people coming to. Yeah. To the government and saying, give me the vaccination. So what is it, Ron, in our country that has changed us? Where did this lack of trust? Now, don't get me wrong, black and brown people have a complete understanding of why, including myself. We are not trusting vaccinations, and we are not trusting the government. We are not trusting the testing of medical procedures. I mean, let's just make it clear. But as Dr. Hicks, who was an African-American surgeon for Christiana Care, made it very clear to us, is that this is the most tested vaccine in history. Yeah. Not recently, in history, this is the most tested vaccine. So what is it, Ron? Help me understand this. What has changed in our country that we're now so reluctant to understand common sense?
Well, we've gotten too smart for our britches. We've gotten too big for our britches. We think that because we have Google and we have that little computer.
Google's my friend, Ron.
Well, I'm not sure it always is, okay? If it allows you to go and put your ability to decipher scientific information above a medical doctor's, a PhD's ability. Mm-hmm. If that's what Google allows you to do, then Google may not be your friend in that regard. Mm-hmm. There are so many things that impinge on this pandemic. So many things. First of all, it's new.
Yeah, give me some examples of these impinging factors.
It's new. And the way something new gets investigated is different from the way I might think about it. Mm-hmm. Researchers have protocols. Mm-hmm. They investigate it a different way so that the results allow them to say something fairly definitively. Look, I'm hedging everything. I said fairly, because that is the nature of knowledge. That's the nature of the acquisition of knowledge. You know, you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
So you carefully, step by step, look at it, mm-hmm. and then extract what information you can from that. Now, we think we're in a society now where we want instant gratification.
We need it. This generation needs it.
Okay. Well, they shouldn't. Okay. They should learn how to be patient, mm-hmm. how to practice transience, mm-hmm. you know, settle on a position that seems real mm-hmm. at this point, but be prepared to move. Mm-hmm. Be prepared to move to another position. Hmm. I think that need for instant gratification, or that instant knowing, mm-hmm. it's not possible with a pandemic, a new disease like this. It's just not possible. And I think we have to get our brains around that.
Well, what would you say to someone who makes it very clear that, Ron, they're implanting a chip inside the vaccine so we can be tracked?
Well, I turn the other way and talk to somebody else. That's the first thing I would do. That, you know, that's absurd and ridiculous.
It's absurd, but it's
absurd and ridiculous on its face.
It needs to be called concern.
It needs to be called that right away.
Absurd and ridiculous.
That's right. It needs to be called that right away.
But we have to turn that person.
Yeah. It's harder to turn them. But, you know, you can't let the perfect be the enemy of the good here.
Okay.
So there are other people who do not share those kinds of conspiracy theories who you can reach. Reach them.
Well, I without, I guess, speaking against, you know, I've worked for the government for a very long time in one capacity or another, and I am very comfortable in saying the level of conspiracy that it would take in order to track everyone, we don't have that level of organization
Kerwin,
in order to do that.
I've known you for quite a while. You know I'm not going to engage in that kind of discussion.
Well, I'm just saying we just don't have it.
I'm not going to engage in that kind of discussion because it has the premise of it is that there's something to that.
Right.
I do not.
Okay. What would you say to folks who say, you know what, this just has not been tested long enough?
Okay. What I say to them is, yes, that may be true, but consider the alternative.
Right.
Consider the alternative.
And the evidence to that alternative is right there in front of us.
Yes. It's been in front of us. It's been in front of us for nearly 2 years now. And so you know, it is one thing to want it now. It is another thing to insist on absolute certainty.
Agreed.
Knowledge is not that way. Mm-hmm. Knowledge does not work that way. True knowledge does not work that way. You know, certainty is something that grows over time. It grows with experiences. And you're not going to get it just like that. You're not going to get certainty. So when the doctor, the best possible way, I think you ought to accept that. Mm-hmm. You shouldn't say, well, I'll wait for the better possible.
Right. How do we know that that's going to occur? How do we know?
You don't. Of course you don't
right.
know. But what you do know is somebody with training, who's done research, who knows how to interpret research, who knows about physiology, mm-hmm. is telling you this is the best deal. Mm-hmm. This is the best way we can cope with this. Mm-hmm. Listen to them. Don't think you got a better way.
Right.
Because you don't have the credentials or the training
right.
to make that kind of assertion.
I mean, I want to say his name right. Dr. Benenhoff and Dr. Hicks, they used a term that I never thought they would use because they didn't speak to one another, but they made it very clear through this term. As educated as they are, they used the term crapshoot. Both of them did. And they said, look, not getting the vaccine or becoming vaccinated and surrounding yourself with people who are not vaccinated, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when, was the first part. And the second part was your, I guess, health or how it affects you is a crapshoot. And the crapshoot is death or not death. So
that's not a crapshoot.
What?
That's a binary decision.
Right.
That's a binary thing.
Right.
Is it on or is it off? I mean, that's not so much a crapshoot. I mean, I think I understand. This is the term
that they used.
Okay, I think that's what I understand what they're saying, but I'm not sure I do.
Okay.
To me, it's a binary decision. You go with the knowledge, the scientific knowledge that's out there, or you wait for something that you consider better. That's a binary decision. I think it can be said that if you don't get the vaccine and the booster, that's the crapshoot. That is the crapshoot. Getting the vaccine is not the crapshoot.
Right.
Getting the vaccine and the booster and wearing a mask, let's not forget that. That's not the crapshoot.
What's
the crapshoot? The crapshooting is not.
Right.
That's the crapshoot.
So we're going to go down this road. I want you to put your seatbelt on. But I mean, for a lot of people, this is the issue. So let's move from this zip code down through the state. Okay, we're going to move from Wilmington and we're going to begin to work our ways down through Kent and Sussex. And their big thing is this could be a partisan issue, right? Delaware has moved, and I consider Delaware to be purple now. I don't consider this to be a blue state. Even though blue is winning at times, I consider this to be a very purple state, right? So I'm not bringing the agenda into this. I'm just saying, what would you say to those who believe that this is a partisan issue? Because, that's really what it comes down to in a lot of cases. This is a partisan issue.
Okay, there's a historical note here, and you raised it when you talked about polio.
Okay.
What we know right now, polio was not politics. It was not. It was a real disease that frightened parents.
Right,
mostly because kids were the ones who were most susceptible.
Right.
It frightened parents to death. And the government, at that time, the federal government, and some state governments, not all, but the federal government chiefly, did a full court press. Mm-hmm. As you pointed out, people were clamoring for it. Mm-hmm. People were get us a vaccine. Mm-hmm. You know, so. Polio is not politics. Neither is COVID. Politics has nothing to do with infection, virality. Mm-hmm. It has nothing to do with that. And I may be talking out of school here. I'm not a doctor. but I haven't noticed any infections called Democratic and Republican. I just have not noticed those.
Last week,
Their attitudes.
Last week, our former president, President Trump, who I know you're a big fan of, made it very clear that he was boosted during a rally. And he was booed during that rally for being boosted. So that tells me a couple things. One, you're just not vaccinated, but you're boosted. So you've made a conscious decision and infected and was infected at least one time that we know. We don't know if there's been subsequent times because it's not really reported on in regards to his health. But I believe that even he thinks that this COVID outbreak is real, despite earlier notions that it was going to pass in a few months, that only a few people would be infected in the United States, that the heat would kill it, that bleach would kill it, that an ultraviolet light might kill it, that we could re-sanitize masks. There's been a lot. Nonetheless, he's vaccinated and boosted. So is it truly, if someone is believing that brand of politic, then is it still a partisan issue if the leader of that brand of politics is vaccinated and boosted? And on top of that, people say, oh, well, that was just for the news. It does not behoove him or his agenda to be vaccinated or boosted, or does it behoove him or his agenda to be vaccinated and boosted and then to say it on television?
I'll leave these calculations that you're going through. I'll leave that up to you. All I know is when the man opens his mouth, he's a hypocrite. That's all I know. And that
Are you talking about former President Trump?
Yes, and that's that's a very human reaction to him. He's not a scientist.
Correct.
Okay?
Correct. Not to my knowledge.
Matter of fact, I doubt if he knows one scientific
We're not
theorem.
going there. We're not going there, Ron. We're not going there.
But that's the point. I mean, I would not listen to him at all, and I don't suggest that anyone else.
But he's boosted, and he admitted it.
Well, I wouldn't infer anything from that because we already know he's a hypocrite. Okay, I wouldn't infer
so you
anything
think you
from
think
that.
There's a counter in him saying that he's boosted? There was a hidden agenda in his recognition. I just think the guy asked the question so fast and he answered it. He didn't have time to think about it.
This is a guy who says, "Don't do what I do what I say." Okay.
Well, you're kind of like that too, Ron.
Hey. What can I say?
I mean, you guys both are from New York. You have that same.
Oh, no, I'm not from New York.
Oh, I apologize. You're from Washington. You're from Washington, which makes it even worse. I mean,
no, it doesn't.
The Potomac two-step is a Washington dance that has been done since the beginning of our democracy. So don't say that New York is any better.
New York is different.
Well, that's one way to put it.
From Washington. It's just different. But I'm not going to defend Washington or New York. That doesn't have anything to do. That doesn't have anything to do with Corona. The things that have to do with Corona are the things that have been found out in the laboratory. That's everything else is nonsense. Everything else should not be part of the conversation. It really shouldn't be. Okay. And that's what I would say to people. See, people, say, oh, Washington's saying this and Washington's saying that. Oh, the media. Listen to not Washington, not to the media. Listen to what the scientists say. Listen to what the researchers say.
Okay, so let's deal with the listening. Okay, let's reel it back in before we go down a road of politics that we do want to go down. Let's just be honest, ladies and gentlemen. We do want to go down that road.
That's a road that leads nowhere.
Now, we've made it very clear that hospitals watch this. They have watched this. They have retweeted it, and we think it's great, our prior episodes. We spoke to politicians this morning, notable politicians this morning who are watching this, and they are on board with everything that we're doing here with this show and with DETV. So we have the ears of folks, right?
Well, we hope.
We hope. We hope. We hope. So what would you, as a citizen of the state of Delaware, as a father, grandfather, what would you want to see the government do to kind of change things here as far as getting the vaccination done? It doesn't need to be punitive.
No, it needs to be. There needs to be some personal investigation here. Years ago, there was a comic strip when people read newspapers. They had a comic strip called Pogo.
I still read newspapers. Right?
Okay. Well, most people don't. Pogo was a swamp creature, had all these friends in the swamp, alligators, squirrels.
Is this going to be one of your Ron stories? I don't know.
Yes.
If we have
Okay, I will get to the point quickly.
You.
One of the great sayings of Pogo was, "We have met the enemy, and it is us." Mm-hmm. We are our own worst enemy here. We who somehow look at this coronavirus thing and try to find all kinds of ways to negate it, ways to absent ourselves from its path. Mm-hmm. We come up with all kinds of excuses. There is none. There is no excuse. But the only way to do it is through the vaccine, wearing masks, mm-hmm. getting boosted. Mm-hmm. Omicron is going to be with us for a while, but we're not sure how long.
But what's next after it?
Well, that's always the question.
What's next? And no one has an answer.
You're right. You know, and no one has the answer because no one's had experience with this.
But the one thing that they are certain of is that there will be a next.
Yes. Now, to be clear, what the research has shown is Omicron, while more transmissible than Delta, is less
deadly. But
okay,
but we made it clear last night. What makes you think that you're just going to get Omicron? Delta is still out there as a variant.
I agree.
What makes you think that's the crapshoot?
Well, first of all, you're right. I don't know whether I'm going to get any of this stuff.
Right.
But I have the vaccine, and I have a booster, which is my best chance.
Right.
My best chance, logically and reasonably, to avoid the crapshoot.
Right.
Okay? You're right. I don't know. We're going to have to watch and see how this plays out. People are not scientists, but they have to start thinking like that a little bit more. They have to stop expecting a perfect understanding of something in this moment in time when we're in the middle of the experience.
So what do you think we should do, or not we? I'm doing everything that I can as far as getting this message out. I've taken every format that I possibly could think of in order to make sure that I'm teaching the public, but touching at least one person. My goal, as I look into that camera, is to get at least one person to change their mind.
Okay. All I can say to you, Kerwin, keep trying. That's all I can say. I think you're doing the right thing. Keep trying. That's all. I mean, this is a race.
But what do you think of the punitive aspect? I mean, we've seen the things, and we'll talk about this more in the next segment after the break. But we've talked about, what is the penalty for not doing it? We penalize for you get a penalty for not paying your taxes. You get a penalty for driving too fast, which I think is that's a whole nother story. You get a penalty for a parking meter expiration. You get a penalty for just about
I need to interrupt
anything.
You.
Why are we not getting a penalty for this?
You are talking about penalties that exist in the framework of our law, okay, and our society.
And we make laws every day.
I know. That's what you're talking about. COVID does not fit in that area.
Right, but no,
it really doesn't.
You not being vaccinated
penalty
completely affects my life.
Yes, it does. But the penalty for COVID is that you're going to die. You're going to catch it and die.
But how many people are you taking with you? The penalty for driving 160 miles an hour in a residential neighborhood is probably you dying. Okay?
Cars are man-made, streets are man-made. Yes, those laws governing that man-made terrain They make sense. They're logical. COVID doesn't live in that universe. COVID lives elsewhere. And I think scientists will tell you, you can't expect a virus, something biological like this, to actually behave according to rules and laws that we have set up. Mm-hmm. So when I know we're getting a little too philosophical about this, and that people tend to lose interest. Mm-hmm. But the fact of the matter is, do not try to superimpose or transpose civil structures on a pandemic. It doesn't work. The pandemic has its own rules.
We got to do something,
and everything.
We have to do something.
Yes,
we
do.
Do something.
All I can say is keep trying what you're trying.
Well, we're going to try more after the break. How about that?
Okay.
Please come back, listen to us yet again. Try to convince you to get your COVID vaccine and to be tested if you feel that you're already infected. We look forward to seeing you again in a couple minutes.
This message is brought to you by Newcastle County Government.
The speed at which the vaccine has come about has given a few folks pause. But when you're losing 500,000 lives in a span of 6 to 8 months, you must respond quickly. The good news is the technology, the messenger RNA vaccination, is 30 years old. It's been in the lab waiting for the opportunity to take place. Now, most vaccines have taken years to perfect, but you weren't in the kind of crisis that we're in right now. I mean, this is the largest pandemic in 100 years. So you've got to respond quickly because it's responding quickly. And that's the misperception. It's old technology applied in a very new way for something that was deadly and continues to be.
This message is brought to you by Newcastle County Government.
While we have vaccines that are highly effective, some folks are non-vaxxers, and I get that, but at the end of the day, it's not about you. It's about that 5-year-old, that 6-year-old that don't have any options. Should they get infected and you be unable to hold their hand in the ICU simply because you chose not to be vaccinated, that's a tough pill to swallow.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, for DETV's COVID Conversations. This is the final segment of this week-long video segment that we have done. The other 3 have been live streams, and this is a pre-recorded episode because I wanted to get it just right. We're fortunate, and I did say fortunate enough to have Ron Smothers here, a longtime New York Times reporter who's now a Delaware transplant, like so many others, to our area. And he is a pundit. He is my own personal curmudgeon who follows me and trolls me and makes sure that I do the proper thing and I say the proper thing, my own personal edit button. But I thought it was great to have him on the show today and share his opinion as a common person here in Delaware and his thoughts on the vaccine. I understand his thoughts on the vaccine and his fear on the vaccine, and it is shared by so many other people. We are concerned. We are concerned for ourselves. We are concerned for our families. We are concerned for our children especially. Earlier this morning, I received a notification from my child's school. All of my children attend the same school, and they made it very clear that school won't be open until next Wednesday. Not this Wednesday, but Wednesday after next, because the Omicron variant is rampant and is affecting our life. Earlier this year, we made progress. We were able to damp down things. People were wearing their masks. So many people were getting the vaccination. And we felt that we were putting not only 2020 behind us, but this nasty, nasty virus. Unfortunately, things are starting to turn the other way. Earlier this year, we were dealing with the past, social unrest, trying to topple our capital. But now things have calmed down. And I thought because of that, so would everyone's misinformation and ideas about the vaccination and where this vaccine was coming from and how it was affecting our bodies and so on and so forth. I'm going to be honest with you. The effect to your body is health. The effect to your body is making a good decision for you and your family, and we hope that you do it. The state has provided a webpage, which we'll post again, where you can go and find information in regards to the vaccine, where to get it. Again, there's no cost to this, okay? It's not costing you anything. Also, you can go and find out where you can get tested. If you're feeling bad, where you can go to begin to feel better and get the information that you need. Let's make it very clear. Our hospitals are beginning to get to the point of capacity. And what does that mean to you? That means that care, is going to be harder to obtain. They're going to give you great care, but there may be a line. Let's just be honest. Surrounding states, more of the same. New York, New Jersey, Maryland, Baltimore, they are all hot spots. If you look at the New York Times this morning and you take a look at their page in which they track COVID outbreaks in our area, Delaware is red as being bad. We are a bright orange. It means we are well on our way. So it is important that we take precaution. Tonight will be New Year's Eve, and people love to gather. We love to gather. We love to, I guess, get with our friends. We love to be in everyone's presence, sometimes a little too close. And tonight is a great opportunity for this virus to continue to spread and spread well into January. What we're seeing now is the results of people that more than likely got together during Thanksgiving. And we're dealing with the results of that. So we're asking for common sense. And we've talked earlier about common sense and how it's not common. We've talked about why is it so hard right now for especially Americans to get this vaccination. 2/3, Dr. Hicks said, 2/3 of Delawareans are not vaccinated. Brass tacks, 2/3. So those folks that you see walking around without a mask, you might feel comfortable in saying, oh, you know what, they're vaccinated. They made the right decision. No, they're just not wearing a mask. That's what it comes down to. So those are the real numbers. 2/3 of Delawareans are not vaccinated, right? So we've talked about earlier on this episode what would we say to government? And Mr. Smothers, again, welcome to the show. But I wanted to talk about earlier this week, and I asked all the doctors this, on Tuesday of this week, President Biden, our own Joe Biden, reached out to all the governors to do an Omicron check. How's your state holding up? What are you seeing? Letting them know about the aid that they can get. Delaware has activated the National Guard, and the National Guard is in our hospitals, not carrying guns, but carrying masks and vaccinations and ensuring and backing up our nurses and medical staff to ensure that proper care is happening in our state hospitals. What would you tell President Biden at this time if you had his ear?
I will tell him what I guess I told you in our last segment. Keep trying. But what we have seen is, for a variety of reasons, none of which are sound scientifically or medically, governors don't feel a need.
Well, you can't say all governors.
I say some governors.
Some governors, okay.
Yeah. We do have this federal system where, there are different levels, and the federal government can recommend and urge. They've done that.
Do you think it was a good idea for Governor Carney to activate the National Guard to support, or does that send the wrong message, or was it a power play? What do you think?
I don't know. I can't speculate on that. I don't really know. You don't activate the National Guard without a defined mission, and I don't know what that mission is.
To support hospitals.
Well, okay. We'll see. That's a limited enough mission, right. And that could make sense. Could, but we don't want to tear down completely the governmental structure we have. I don't think it's necessary to do that. But we do need governors to recognize the seriousness of this. Mm-hmm. It is not the structure that is preventing them from doing that. There is some kind of alien disease in their head that is preventing them from seeing
the urgency of this.
Yes.
The criticality.
Yes.
More than anything.
Or even the meaning of the word pandemic. The actual meaning of the word pandemic. I mean, you know, just go to the dictionary, look up the word. Oh, that's what it is.
Right. Right.
You know, so but that's not something. The fact that they can't do that, or seem for some reason, some of them unable to do that, is not it is not the cause of our governmental structure. You know, as Shakespeare says, our fate is in the stars.
Right.
You know, it's in something much larger than that, and it's kind of the human beings, the human creatures.
So talking about the human creatures of this, what do you think about this being related to human infrastructure? I mean, we had a prime example, and I'd love to know your opinion on this. And you know, there are times throughout the year where I have to travel a lot, right? So we were down pilots last week because of COVID. Mm-hmm. There was an outbreak of COVID through certain airlines, and pilots couldn't show up to work. We don't want them to show up to work because they were testing positive for COVID. Not only the pilots, but the flight attendants and parts of the crew. And this is during the holiday season, which was one of the busiest times of year. So why aren't we thinking, because I don't want Americans, and I'm just dealing with Americans, let's just say people, okay? I don't want people to think that an incident last week is something that's going to be a one-off.
Yeah, I understand you urging, you know, people to not see it as a one-off, but I think you know, we don't want to face up to the facts. You know, as the guy said in the movie, you don't want to hear the truth.
Right.
And the truth is, we are not going to be through this thing anytime soon. Mm-hmm. The truth is, we're not going to know anything absolutely about coronavirus until well after it's no longer a problem. Mm-hmm. Now, you got to live with that reality. Mm-hmm. And you have to function within that reality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right. That's true.
And you can't sit here and say, oh, I'm just mad. I want to know right now.
Right.
That's not going to get it. That's not going to change anything.
So, but what is it going to be next? Is it not going to be our pilots? Is it going to be our construction workers? We have a great infrastructure bill that's passed.
It's going to be everything, Kerwin.
That comes out, and we're going to have all these people doing. And the thing that gets me is when you have something that's like the Build Back Better bill, which is being held up right now, but it's dealing a great deal with health of our nation, the health of our nation, which could be vaccinations, which could be just one of the doctors this week made it very clear that a lot of this misinformation is because people don't see doctors. It doesn't have anything to do with Twitter. It doesn't have anything to do with Facebook or Instagram. It has everything to do with the health of our nation.
Well, hold it now. It does have to do, because when they don't see doctors, where are they going for the information? Well, they're going to Twitter. They're going to Facebook. They're going to
Fox News
or whatever.
Right.
That's where they're going, and then they come out and say, "Oh, I've done my research."
Well,
but they haven't seen a doctor.
I'm not saying the CNN News is any better. But
well,
I'm just saying.
I'm not going to get into a comparison here. I'm just saying.
Right. So now, I mean, what is it going to be? How do we? So my school is out. My kids are going to be back home with me for another week and a half, And it's not just our school district. It's school districts all across the state are going to, because this is a statewide emergency now that the governor has declared. So that is the human infrastructure thing. So we're coming back to the root of this question, Ron. And I'm not expecting that you have the answer.
Okay, good.
I'm just venting. I'm not expecting that you have the answer. But what is it going to take for people to understand that just end this? The simple fact of having your kids at home with you for weeks at a time should force you to your local Walgreens or wherever to get the vaccine.
It didn't do that in the first when the
Good
first.
point. Good point. People
Okay.
did a year and a half and they didn't do it. So
Okay.
why would
Exactly.
Right.
Then when the vaccine came out, it still didn't force
Good
people
point.
to.
Good point.
I mean, I think their policy, if it could be said, people have a policy and they don't, is to hope for the best.
Right.
No.
Right.
And all I would stress to people is that doesn't work. That doesn't work medically, doesn't work scientifically. Hope is not a vaccine.
Right.
Yeah,
Hope is
the
not a vaccine.
vaccine is a vaccine.
Right.
That's all you can keep telling people, that they backslide.
You just made a hashtag, Ron. Do you know that? Hope is not a vaccine. That's a
Oh no, I don't do hashtags.
hashtag. The vaccine is a vaccine. Hashtag the hope is not a vaccine. Look, you didn't even want to do this today, but yet you are making COVID history here
No, I'm not.
by coming up with ways to get people vaccinated.
Well, as a politician said, if I choose not to run, and if elected, I will not serve.
1 out of 6, Mr. Smothers, 1 out of 6. That means if you get vaccinated, your one vaccination can possibly save the lives of 6 people. And they made it very clear that the unvaccinated, that's normally the status for your entire house, right? So if I'm not vaccinated and I have those ideas, everyone in my house probably
isn't
has
vac-
those same ideas.
Probably.
Okay? So that being said, if I become infected, the likelihood that my entire house will become infected is extremely high.
Extremely.
We're just walking through this. And if that house becomes infected, not knowing which variant I am carrying and I have spread, the likelihood of them becoming sick is probable. But how sick?
We don't know.
The crapshoot.
Well, that's right. It could be very, very, very sick to death, or not so sick. But that's the crapshoot.
Right. And it's not
That's a crapshoot.
It's not
of no
age
vaccine.
dependent anymore. But earlier on we thought, well, if you were above 60,
We thought a lot of things earlier.
it could be this, you could have
changed.
greater
We learned.
symptoms and whatever. But the people are dying are in their 20s and 30s.
Well, yeah. I'm no more scandalized by that than I was scandalized by 60, 70-year-olds dying. I mean, it's both of those are terrible, okay? Especially when we have some way we can keep those numbers down. And that's what I said, keep those numbers down.
Right.
Because we are in the middle of a pandemic, a virus that is mutating. We're in the middle of it. We aren't going to know what's going to happen next week, but we do know what happened last week.
Right.
That's all we can go on. Get vaccinated. That's all I can say.
Get vaccinated as soon as you
get
can.
Boosted when you can.
I went to Super G to get my booster.
I went to Walgreens.
And I walked around with the cart. I pushed around and I stopped and I said, I'd like to get vaccinated. I'd like to get my booster. And they said, oh, well, all we have is Pfizer. I said, I don't care what you have as long as I can get in. She said, well, you got to go and you got to fill out an app. And I walked around for an hour. I filled out the app, came right back around again and got my booster and kept shopping.
Yeah.
It was easy. It didn't cost me anything. It was same day. There are now, I will say that a lot of the, I guess, the vaccination sites, such as our local drugstores and supermarkets, they are under siege right now because there are a lot of people who are finally getting it, and not only getting the vaccine, but getting the message. I guess it's nothing like fear. Fear, let that be the incentive. I mentioned earlier in our first.
Not the incentive, the motivator.
No, it's an incentive.
Okay.
Because the fear is death. Getting the vaccine is the incentive for not dying. Motivation, incentive, whatever. They're getting it in their arms.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
They're getting it in their arms. I don't know, how do we need to go? Well, the schools are doing it now, right? So kids are doing it right there at the school, with parent permission, of course. I don't want to make it seem as though the school is holding your children down. None of the school districts in the state are doing that. This is through parent permission that the vaccine is being given to students according to guidelines and appointments with your nurses.
And it's sad that you had to say that because the whole idea of vaccination has been so politicized. It's sad that you had to say that.
Well, it's the truth.
Yeah.
It's the truth. So as me being an adjunct professor and you being a, I guess, retired professor at the university, what would you say to a student that is on the edge of, would you have classes in the spring?
No.
You would not have classes in the spring?
I would not. I'd go back to virtual.
Really?
Yes, I would.
Would you teach if told to?
Well, I'm gonna slip that question because I am retired.
Right.
So I don't have to make that decision.
Right.
But I will tell you, I have a cousin who was a law professor at the University of Maryland, and she just retired. She says, and she said to me, "It's a good thing I'm retired because I would not go into that classroom."
Really?
Now. That's what she said. So I respect that. I understand that. She's been very careful. When I went to her house for Thanksgiving dinner, first thing she gave me was a COVID test.
In the house?
In the house. Yeah, at home COVID test. First thing she gave me. I understand. I'm not mad. That's fine. Yeah. So I know I would. I don't think I would teach. I don't think I would. But I'm retired.
Right. I'm on the fence.
It's not even a fair question.
I'm on the fence. I have a class scheduled for the spring, and it's like, what am I going to do? What are the levels going to be? If the state is in a state of emergency and my kids can't go to school, am I going to school? And I think about the parents now that my children are not at a college age right now, but parents that have to make that decision whether or not to send their kids or not send their kids. And earlier on, you were a little bit more comfortable because you had to be, because we believed earlier on that it wasn't happening as much at a mortal level to younger people. But now that's not the case.
And that's with, I'm going to say it again. With this virus, we're in the middle of it.
Right.
What we know about it is this much. What we don't know, it stretches all the way out to that wall.
So it makes sense to be vaccinated.
Of course it makes sense to be vaccinated. Of course it makes sense to seriously consider whether you want to teach a class.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
These are real considerations. Now, we may not like it, but most of us are adults.
Right.
We know how to deal with situations that are uncomfortable, or we situations that present us with intractable choices. We know how to do it, and we do it. We do it all the time. This is one of those situations where we have to summon that kind of energy,
Right.
that kind of muscle power. Yeah.
I don't know what they're going to do. I don't know what the guidance is going to be. I think a lot of schools this week are going to make a decision because after this week, people are going to start filtering back in.
Well,
and we're going to have to find out
I urge those officials to be conservative and cautious in their decision making. Err on the side of caution. That's what I would urge them to do. That's the only way to go.
Will teleworking ever go away? Or is
I don't know.
teleworking here to stay?
I do not know the answer to that because I don't have
Oh, this is another because I'm retired and I don't have to work anymore.
no, I just
Is that
don't
what
have
that is?
the research on the changing workplace and the trends. You know, you see a lot of trends, they go this way and then suddenly they turn and they're
Right.
different. Well, how come you didn't see that back there? I have not looked at that kind of research into changing workplace.
Okay.
I just have not looked at it.
Okay.
So I'm loath to speculate.
Okay. I'll go for that.
I'm just loath to speculate.
I don't see the advantage anymore in supporting the workforce in which we have in the way in which we used to work. I think that the times have changed, and I don't, with all the technology that we have now, that we need a full-time at work situation. Now, I think that for some, you still need to go to the office because it is a different feel. But now, especially with safety and security, we're losing. I went to over the Christmas holidays, like so many other people. I sat there, I looked at my phone and said, you know what? I'm going to get a new phone. Not as a gift to me. I'm going to get a new phone. So I live in Middletown, Delaware. No big secret. I go to the Middletown store and it's closed. I'm like, what? Verizon's closed. I'm looking for an at lunch sign or we'll be back in 5 minutes with the little clock with the hand or something like that. Nothing. So I drive to the other Verizon store close to the Christiana Mall. I go in and I was at the Middletown store and they're closed. I don't know if it was a power thing, but the lights looked on. She said, no, COVID. COVID closed the whole store. COVID closed the whole store. So, you know, is there another way of doing business? Because, I mean, I don't want to be, maybe it's all the movies that I watch and my wife says that I'm into conspiracy theories, and maybe I am. But will there be another virus after this? Like, do we need to change our way of doing business and the way of working?
I'm loath to call him a philosopher, but the social analyst, the late social analyst Alvin Toffler, in his book Future Shock, very apt title. This is way back this is from the 60s, I believe, 60s or 70s. Future Shock. His solution for a world in which things are changing so rapidly, so fast. So fast, was to practice transience. What is it today? Okay, I'll deal with that. Well, tomorrow, I got to move over here.
So dealing with the present.
Yes, stay in the present because you can't keep up with the pace. You can't even predict
Right.
the rate of acceleration.
Right.
You can't even predict. So you just practice transience. You say, okay, and live with that.
Right.
You know, don't expect certainty.
Right.
And don't expect what you know today will be what you know tomorrow.
Right.
And again, we're getting a little too philosophical.
Well,
here.
you know,
But-
we're
but
ending the show. I thought, you know, maybe a philosophical approach is our last-ditch effort. This is our last-ditch effort,
Yes.
right? We have a minute now to give our last plea to people to get vaccinated. And as the guest, I will give you, because I'm going to tell them up front I'm going to be long-winded. So this is our last-ditch effort. What would you tell them?
Practice transience, folks. What we know today is not what we're going to know tomorrow. Be prepared. Don't be surprised. It is the rhythm of things now, I think, especially when it comes to COVID. Listen to the doctors. Listen to the scientists. But practice transience. They're not going to know everything today. They'll know more tomorrow. Be prepared for that and just kind of try to live by that mantra. You know, not the one that we usually do. Hey, I want it and I want it now. Don't live by that mantra. Live by the mantra that what we know today is probably only a fraction of what we'll know tomorrow.
Well, you've heard it here. I'd like to thank Mr. Ron Smothers, as always, as being a good friend not only to myself, but to the agenda and to DETV in providing us that different perspective. But you know what? Our perspective is the same, and that is get vaccinated. Get vaccinated as soon as you possibly can. I have provided, and DETV has provided, Christiana Care has provided, as well as St. Francis has provided, a great deal of information for you and your family to review in regards to our webinar series here on the COVID virus and the vaccination events that are here and why you need to do that. We have made it very clear to you. We have made it very plain, and we have done the very best we can. And I want to thank everyone that has come on this week for their time, because dealing with the physicians that we were dealing with, they didn't have a lot of time because they're dealing with sick people every single day. We made sure that we had people that were in charge of critical care here in the state speak to you through our web series, so you understood exactly what was at stake. And they didn't pull any punches. They made it clear to you that a ventilator would be in your future if you make it to critical care. And how unpleasant that is. It made it very clear to you in regards to the numbers. You can't beat math, folks. The numbers are very clear that if you are not vaccinated, that is 90% of the population that they have that is on critical care right now. They made it very clear to you that for the past 18 to 19 months of dealing with this horrible virus, they have had 0 people in critical care due to the vaccine. No one is there with Pfizer poisoning or Moderna poisoning or Johnson & Johnson poisoning or any horrible side effects because of that. That's 0. No one. Out of 24 months, out of 2 years, they haven't had that. I understand that the vaccine has only been readily made available not even a year yet. But it's important to know that that vaccine has saved a tremendous amount of lives. One vaccine dose has the possibility of saving 6 lives. And it's important. So let's review New Year's Eve. New Year's Eve is hours away, right? Less than 12, I think. So let's be careful when the ball drops. It may not be the year to be in a bar. It may not be the year to be in a large crowd. And I understand gathering. This is a spiritual day for a lot of people. There have been years, including myself, where, I don't want to be anywhere else but in church during New Year's Eve. But if they have an option to view it online, you may want to think about taking that option. I'm not telling anyone not to go to church. I'm not telling anyone not to believe in this. I'm saying watch your crowds and watch your population. And if you are sick, get tested. If you are sick, be sure to go to your local physician. Prevent. Wear your mask. They're readily available. I went into a Wawa this morning. I didn't have a mask. I asked the person behind the counter and they gave it to me. They didn't charge me for the mask. They gave it to me. Be sure to wear your mask. 2/3 of the people in Delaware are not vaccinated. It boggles my mind. So if they're not vaccinated and numbers are rising, how can you be certain when you're around them that you're not going to get sick? Keep your mask on. If we can't agree on the vaccination, let's at least agree on the mask. They made it very clear yesterday that flu cases in the hospitals are down. They're not coming to the hospital anymore with the flu. They're not coming to the hospital because of the flu, because they're wearing their mask. So please, wear your mask. Be safe this year. Let's do something great in 2022 that's not COVID related. Let's look back at this and say, you know what? I'm glad Kerwin's not on my screen again talking about COVID. Next year, we don't want to have these same conversations. Today was a little bit of humor. It was a little different than the other ones because we're trying to come up with a way that you understand the importance of what's going on right now in our country and what's going on throughout the world. So be safe this year. From DETV, from the Agenda, and from the Gaines family, we love you. Take care. We look forward to seeing you again right here on DETV.